I didn't build Designjoy to build a company. I didn't build
Yeah.
Designjoy to leave my full-time job to run something on my own. I built it really just to make a few extra grand a month, which was, quite a bit of money for me back then. Designjoy really in general has sort of shattered the ceiling in terms of the income that a designer can make, 2 to 3x more than doctors if you're in my scenario, right? There's a large subset of companies out there who do know what good design looks like, and they do want that and they're willing to pay for it, but they don't want to run the risk of hiring the wrong person and dealing with the consequences of that.
Let's kick off. Let's do this. All right, Brett, I want to jump right into the deep end with your controversial tweets that sparked a lot of controversy on Twitter recently, which I think is funny because it depicts your product, Designjoy. It depicts people's perception of what you do, and it depicts like what's happening, right? So a client just signed on my 5001 design subscription plan. Their first request was to convert all of their designs to auto layout and create Figma components out of everything. I refunded their payment. I'd rather watch grass grow. Why did that like spark so much controversy?
Uh, Gosh, I mean, probably for a lot of reasons, I think. I mean, if you read the tweets, that there's just as much, if not more, supporters of that tweet, but they're the quiet
Mhm.
ones that just like it. But I think a lot. I think maybe it sounded a little bit arrogant that I would just shoo away a $5,000 gig over something as minute as like building design systems. But it's sort of what I've preached since day one of running Designjoy and playing to my strengths and not taking on things that I'm not good and quick at. And so, for me, if I were to take on that job, I mean, it would have incurred a lot of stress. It would have prolonged other client projects. Um, and it wouldn't have satisfied me at the end of the day. It wasn't worth the money. I have 50 other clients who wanted the door at Designjoy, so shooing away one is not
Mm.
an issue for me. And I think it seemed maybe a little arrogant on Twitter.
Yeah, of course. But for you, you have to be very selective with your work, right? And who you pick with because your time is limited and it's only you, right? So maybe that's what people don't understand is the fact that if they are, stuck with a particular client or they work for a particular company, you have to go and do that work, right? If you got told by your previous employer to go make this stuff, what can you do about it? So I think there's that kind of like bias that people have that, oh, whatever work you get, you have to take, which is not the reality.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and I think that's one of the faults of Twitter that I've noticed. I mean, everyone thinks that like everything you say on Twitter applies to everyone in every situation, and no one really ever reads between the lines and understands the full context of a lot of what I tweet. I mean, in that case, right, I'm talking about me specifically. I'm not saying you should drop a $5,000
Mm.
job if your client requests a design system. I said I did, given the circumstances that I'm under. And I think I come under a fire quite a bit under those lines, and I think people need to consider the context and consider what I have on my plate and the fact that I don't need a client like that.
Do you think Twitter is a blessing or a curse?
Uh, it's a blessing. I mean, it's definitely a blessing. I can't say that it's hurt me too bad. I mean, the good is definitely outweighed the bad. I mean, I haven't been on Twitter that long, only for barely over a year, so I'm still fairly new to it. Still kind of trying to figure out how the platform is. I mean, each platform has their own personality. Like, I get eaten alive on Reddit. Twitter, sort of get eaten alive on. Some platforms are more favorable towards what I'm doing than others. Twitter's been fairly friendly,
Yeah.
but I've met a lot of dope people, got a lot of clients from Twitter, grown an audience on there. So I mean, all in all, it's been a huge blessing.
I heard you mention before about how, you have to like share the numbers and share the wins on Twitter and like that's the stuff that just works, just how the platform operates. That kind of seems maybe nearly at contrast to your personality, who's like, quite chill, relax, you're just happy to work on
Mhm.
Design Joy, chill out with your family, like that's what you kind of want to do. Did you ever find that to be maybe a conflict over the past year of writing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's probably the thing that I struggle the most with because it goes against basically how I am in my private life, right? Um, it sort of plays into it. I mean, I know very well what gets engagement and what gets eyeballs, and I know also
Mhm.
what draws people to my service and the product I service in general and movement in general, right? For example, if I were to say like I'm making a lot of money, doing this new business model that no one's ever heard of, that doesn't mean as much or won't strike someone's interest as much as, hey, I'm making $100,000 doing X, right? So that's what I've done since day one. That's how I've gotten to where I am, is talking about money and how, productized services and Designjoy really in general has sort of shattered the ceiling in terms of the income that a designer can make. I mean, you can make more
Yeah.
than doctors, or two to three X more than doctors if you're in my scenario, right? And so it's important. That's the angle that I've chosen to go after, and that's what gets people interested the most. It's anything money related on Twitter, and other people who do it the same thing will tell you that stuff goes far. And it's
Yeah.
not that I'm being fake or anything. It's just I just know that that's what pulls people in, and it's a little bit of a balance too between like serving and talking to my audience and then growing my audience, because those are the tweets that grow my audience versus if you follow me,
Mhm.
you're gonna probably get tired of me eventually, and that's okay.
That's interesting because as you said earlier about you have to see between the lines and really like separate out a tweet is that for most people when I read those tweets it's motivating, right? For someone who has an agency, that inspires me to think, Jesus, I need to productize my service. I need to get better. I want to get better. I want to push. I want to be like Brett. I want to get better. However, some people would look at it then and be pissed off, disgruntled by it. So again, it depends on your perception going into this, which is why I think that whole Twitter space is quite interesting because it's like it acts on its own. It's like its own beast in itself, right? What would be your kind of perspective
Yeah.
on the whole money Twitter space?
I think it's a good thing. I think money, I mean, let's be honest, at the end of the day, right? We all work 40 hours plus a week for money. I mean, most of
Yeah.
us don't work purely 100% for enjoyment, or we'd probably be doing other things. So it's weird to me that we put so much of our, I mean, we put, 90% of our life is working away for money, but yet it's a taboo subject to talk about.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I get it. I get it in certain circles, but on Twitter, I think had I not taken that approach, really, I mean, productized services in general probably would be nowhere where they are today. There certainly wouldn't be 5,000, 10,000 designers out there building productized services had I not taken that approach to sort of
Mhm.
sharing my numbers and that sort of thing. It would have never taken off. It wouldn't have had the legs. So
$100%.
I encourage people to talk about money, because if you're not making a lot, it helps people relate to you and feel like they're not alone. If you're making a lot, it can inspire people. So I don't think that you can do any
Mhm.
wrong by talking about money.
And that's what I've been trying to do on my podcast for quite some time, right? So when I was working in finance, I was leaving. Everyone who followed me was like, "Oh, this guy's like, he's going out on his own." And then I was kind of struggling in around 5, 10,000 a month, 80, 70% margin. And then we're building the team, and they've kind of seen that development over time. And that's what becomes valuable,
Yeah,
right? It builds the audience, it builds like your super fans, it builds a tribe, and fundamentally, it helps other people. That's the whole purpose of my podcast. Has been
yeah.
to help younger people come true, and it shows them that this is real. It's not just make believe shit. And I think that's the reality of it. So I want to get into Designjoy, and I want to go back through your journey a small bit because you've gone from zero to 100,000, but it's been over 6 years. First, you want to start off with a quote from yourself: "Don't judge the success of your startup by your first 2 or 3 years. If you believe in what you're doing, keep pushing because you might just be on the brink of something great." Talk me through that.
Yeah, I mean, it's Designjoy's story. It's my story. I mean, there are several points in time where I could have easily given up on Designjoy. I think I think I was fortunately wise to keep my full time job as long as I did. Otherwise, I would have probably let go of Designjoy a long time ago, because I mean, anybody that knows my story and has been following my monetary updates since day one knows that for the first 3 years, I mean, I really wasn't making much at all for Designjoy, and there was a period of time where I wasn't making anything. I stuck with it for 3 years because I kept my job and was financially okay. And then that third year, things just absolutely kind of went to the moon.
Hmm.
But I think most people would have let it go. I mean, there was plenty of time to do so, and kind of writing on the wall that it was a little too early.
Hmm.
But luckily, I stuck with it.
Let's stay on that beginning pad of the first 3 years because I'm looking even at that curve right now, and as you said, you're flatlined for so many months, right?
Hmm.
During that year, so 0 to 10,000 took you 3 years. Why do you think that took so long? And do you think you'd be able to speed it up with a combination of maybe outreach or maybe
Yeah.
ads or teaming up with people? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, every business that I've ever built, I've bootstrapped myself. I haven't had an audience in quite some time since college. I mean, I had an audience in college, let it go when that business went away. and didn't have an audience when I built Designjoy. I didn't really have any money to spend on marketing. So I did some cold emails, launched on Product Hunt, got some free organic traffic and clients that way, and didn't really
Mhm.
have anything to do beyond that. So, I mean, I've written about plenty of times, Product Hunt was that first thing that got me out there, and it pretty much happened instantly. And then beyond that, I mean, I just sort of let clients come in the door however way they could, but I really wasn't doing any sort of outreach or marketing or nothing paid. And so I
Mhm.
pretty much ran Designjoy in the dark for 3 years before building an audience and getting it going.
That's crazy. Do you think you could have sped it up a bit by doing outreach, like more outreach or targeting particular companies, vice versa?
For sure. I mean, again, it was for me, like, I didn't build Designjoy to build a company. I didn't build
Yeah.
Designjoy to leave my full-time job to run something on my own. I built it really just to make a few extra grand a month, which was, quite a bit of money for me back then. So even the months where I wasn't making anything, I mean, I had a full-time job, and the months that I was making something, it was fantastic side income for me, and that's
Yeah.
all I ever really envisioned it being. So, no, I could there's several things I could have done, but I didn't have the desire to or need to.
So I want to dig into that, right? That's very interesting because I was quite similar, right? I had my podcast, which was doing well. I did a lot of freelance consulting, or we started doing small agency work for other brands when I was in my 9 to 5. But it was kind of like free money to some degree, and you're like,
Mhm.
it's like a big, you're like
It's a
happy
bonus. Yeah, yeah.
regardless of the outcome, right? If $500 or $5,000, you're like delighted. But when you
Sure.
switch, obviously there's that pressure, okay? But for you, you took a good couple of years and you got to 60K before you did that. So talk me through like what's happening psychologically there. Like, were you kind of scared to leave your 9 to 5? How did that kind of play out?
Yeah, what I always say about this, I mean, so yeah, I Designjoy, again, like, it was so quiet and so dead for so many years, and then it just blew up out of nowhere. I thought my fear was that it could go away just as quickly. So, um, I actually hit $80,000 a month, and then finally had that feeling in my gut that, like, all right, I've got something here. It has legs. Worst case scenario, if it fails, like, what do I do? Okay, I've got that figured out. Let's go, like, headstrong into it full time. Um, but it allowed me to build Designjoy with zero. I had zero risk at all building Designjoy. I was under no pressure
Mhm.
whatsoever. I could build it my way at my pace, and that job just provided me that clarity and space to be able to do that without any sort of pressure at all.
All right, people, we're just going to take one short little break for a little update about Podcast University. So, if you enjoy podcasts like this and you want to start your own podcast, head down to the links down below to Podcast University. This is a learning platform that I've built to help people like you build, launch, and scale your own podcast. I wasted many years doing this, making it all up as I go. So, I put everything together in a very seamless and easy to follow course for you guys to follow and just learn exactly how to do it. So, if you want to bypass a lot of the mess with your podcast, check out the links down below to Podcast University, and it will show you exactly how to launch and scale your own podcast. Yeah. And I think that's the area of the internet that guys forget about, right? When you see 21-year-olds on Twitter, they're like, oh, fuck the 9 to 5. As in, I worked a 9 to 5. I did a software engineering degree.
Hmm.
I spent 4 years in like finance and tech. And it gave me like clarity, as in when I was building my own thing, because it's like, right, do I want to build an info product? Maybe not right now. If do I want to build this? I had like leeway, I guess. And I think that's what's very undervalued is that you get time, right? And then when you build a capital, you can leave and then have the capital, so you either have time or money. And in the beginning, you have no money, so use your time, and then vice versa, you can swap over. But I think this is very underrated. So, like, what would be your advice for people who are like that? Because a lot of guys that listen to this podcast have jobs and they look down on the fact that they have jobs, they don't appreciate it, and they want to go build something on the side.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've always looked at my job as just it's the in between of I've built stuff my whole life, but things have gone away and sold things and moved out of things, and the job was always sort of the in between. It was never I never looked at my job as something that was eternal or going to be long lasting, but it filled in those
Mhm.
gaps, and again, it like allowed me to fund my startup. So I always tell people, like, there's people out there like Brett, we talked about that I was on the podcast with. Like, he did
Mhm.
YouTube and that from like day one, like right out of college, actually in college. I like admire that sort of tenacity and independence, like, beyond anything I could say. And I think it's amazing when people can do that. But if you're not like that and you're a little bit more risk adverse like I am, there's nothing wrong with the job. Like I said, you can leave it anytime you want to. And the way that people work nowadays from home, and there's so much opportunity to build things on the side and get things
Mhm.
going, whereas otherwise, 5 years ago would have never been possible working in an office all day long. So I'd say
Mhm.
take advantage of that opportunity, build something on the side, whatever it is, whether it's a product, service, or something else, and you can always leave your job at any time. So
Mhm. And building a capital, right? So if you have like I think it was like 10 months runway initially, so that I knew that my rent was covered, my food was covered. I could just
hmm
eat chicken and rice every day if I needed to. But I knew I had like roughly like 11 months. And I know you've a family and you've a child as well. Whereas for me it was a lot different, right? It's just me and that's it, right? So obviously different
yeah,
circumstances, and that's what's important here as well, is that like circumstances are so important when you're telling people to go and do this and go and do that. And I think we need to be a bit more realistic a small bit to be like, all right, what's the bridge? Because for me, I was going from tech to media. So what's the bridge in doing this, right? And how can I walk my way across from it? And I think that's very interesting to observe. When you did move, how did you observe like even yourself? How did you change? Because I think that's very interesting, like how I think entrepreneurship can expose someone's personal insecurities. Like I became super anxious. I was like, I need to do sales, I need to do this, do marketing, I need to do fulfillment. I can't have people talking shit about me. So it kind of exposed that. Like, did you ever feel those kind of tendencies arise?
yeah. I wasn't initially, actually. I mean, like I said, I waited till I was making $80,000 a month. So, when I say there was zero
Crazy.
risk with me moving to my full time job, there was none of those feelings present at that time. It was like the greatest weight lifted off my shoulder, the coolest feeling ever to leave a job and go straight into something like that that's doing so well that I was pretty much doing 90% of my time anyways, but that extra 10% made a huge difference, which we might get into. But no, for me, it was. I've obviously had moments post leaving my full time job, going over there, that I thought things could dissipate and what that would mean for me. But things have been just so crazy since then that I haven't even had time to worry about anything, to be honest.
When you were going from, let's say, 0 to 10, 10 to 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, did anything change within your business? Because a lot of people will say you need to kind of do more partnerships, change even the revenue
Yeah.
model because it doesn't scale as well in a service business. How did you how did you scale effectively?
Um, Structurally, if you were to look at my business from the outside, I mean, the only thing that you would notice has changed even since the day one of launching really has been my prices. There's been
Yeah.
some service offerings that have been included and unincluded at times. Other than that, my business looks identical to the day that I launched it up until today, which is funny. I haven't really
Mhm.
expanded on. I don't really have like I've yet to make a marketing plan, yet to make a roadmap, you have to do any sort of anything other than just doing the design work that's on the table. So no, it looks pretty much identical, other than I charge a lot more and
Mm.
offer a few things more. That's it.
So a big thing as agencies grow or services grow is the quality can kind of decrease, right? Because they bring on like a shitload of clients and they have people very spanned out and they're not effectively working on a particular account. Something I'm very mindful of as we've grown. How do you ensure that quality has been there so you've better systems effectively as you went from 0 to 80K a month even before you left your job?
Yeah, for me, I mean, definitely, systems are actually, honestly, I guess I was lucky when I created Designjoy, because I had it pretty much a lot of things spot on from the start. Yeah,
Mm.
and it was a total shot in the dark. It wasn't because I'm some genius that had this thing figured out from day one. It just happened to be the case that a lot of things I was doing back then was what allows me to do what I do today. I'd say the biggest change, the biggest things that's allowed me to do what I do is charging more and getting better clients because of that. And that's allowed me, I've had as many as 50 clients at a time, which was just total hell on earth. To
Mm.
now I manage around 20. So, but those are 20 like super solid, easy to work with, very
Mm.
trusting clients. And that's a world of difference from working with 50 really needy, really difficult clients. It's just a world of difference. So that's provided me a lot of time, which time equates
Mhm.
to quality in a lot of cases. So that's the way that I've managed to get better and better. But yeah.
What was the change in the price for you that has such a significance in the client profile?
Yeah. The biggest change was from 2,500 to 5 grand. So that's what I went through
Yeah.
not that long ago, really. But I mean, I had incremental changes early on, many of them, but that 2,500 to 5 grand, which was doubling my price, obviously had the biggest change.
It makes such a significance, right? Because I think people, including myself, felt that when your prices are a little bit higher, you're not going to get any client. So they feel like that might go month
Hmm.
by month and just not close anything. And we went initially from, I would say, average 3,000 to 5,000, similar to like that. I did it very quickly though, did it very early on. And yeah, you close a fraction of what you would have previously closed at 2,500, but you don't want to, right? The goal
Sure.
isn't more clients, the goal is
No.
more revenue, right? So I think that that
Exactly.
switch in people that switch in people's minds, so it's very difficult to articulate, right? It's like, okay, who's going to pay me five thousand
Yeah.
dollars for designs?
Well, I mean, it's interesting for me. I don't know how it is. I would assume it's pretty similar for you. Like when I was at the $2,500 range, uh, to some people that's extremely cheap. But for the clientele that I was targeting, which was really kind of just people just building stuff out of their garage and funding it themselves, that was quite a bit of money to spend on a subscription of any kind. So
Yeah,
I was at the higher end of those that I was targeting. When I moved to 5K, now I'm into a whole other sphere of clients that I'm now on the cheap end because
yeah.
senior level designers in my case earn 100 to 120 a year, but in my case, I mean, Designjoy costs you $60,000 to $70,000 a year. So now I'm all of a sudden on the cheap end of working with really good clients. So the demand for the service has only increased as my prices have gone up, ironically.
That is the exact same principle I've had from day one, was the fact that you could bring in a marketing executive who could be absolutely shit at running a podcast, who obviously doesn't know how to do it
Mm.
right, because there's a lot of things you can do. So you could pay us 50K a year, and then as a result, you're getting what you want. You have a 30-day break clause if you want to get out of a contract, right? And as a result of doing this, you don't have any of the headache. You don't have any healthcare. You don't have any overheads. So I think that's how we should reframe like how we look at like getting clients, right? Is the fact that, yeah, it's costing you money, but so will anything because you're running a business, right?
Oh
And I think
yeah.
it's funny how you said you access the clients, right? For me, like it's like Series A, Series B, and beyond. For you, I think you mentioned Y Combinator beforehand, people that are venture backed.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of venture back, a lot of just tech startups in general. I mean, as generic as that
Yeah,
may be, but yeah, I
of
mean,
course.
the whole reason of I could write a book on why clients choose Designjoy over hiring full time and all of that, which we could get into. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions around why that is and why people would possibly pay $5,000 a month for design work and whatnot. But
Mhm.
you mentioned some of them, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but that's partially why they're blowing up right now.
Want to ask you about how you package it to people. So I know you mentioned that you focus on output, so you get a shitload of output out. You don't do any communication things like this. Do you ever get feedback from clients about the outcome? Like, oh, like they want this because it's going to create more revenue or whatever. Do you ever feel that kind of dependency that people are like, oh, this is just a cost. It's not generating more revenue. Does that ever come into conversation?
Not really. I mean, the feedback loop doesn't come back that far to me, to be honest with you. After post implementation, I mean, they'll put the design request in. If something's not performing, then they'll come back. I do have a couple of clients that I have today that do share those sorts of things, and they do a lot. There may be e-commerce clients who share a lot of those A/B test results, and that's great. But for the most part, I mean, I'm totally in the dark about what my work is actually contributing to the business because there's just not that level of involvement and collaboration between me and the client.
Why did you do that? So from day one, why was that the goal?
Yeah, I mean, it is a different way of integrating design into a company, and the way that I view it is there's a large subset of companies out there who do know what good design looks like, and they do want that, and they're willing to pay for it, but they don't want, like you mentioned earlier, they don't want to run the risk of hiring the wrong person and dealing with the consequences of that, or working with sort of shady freelancers or very, very expensive and slow agencies. And so Designjoy really kind of filled the gap where you could get this, like, it's like Fiverr on steroids, where you could sign up instantly and get access
Mhm.
to insane design quality in just a couple of days. And it
Mm,
may just be for an MVP, or it may not be. But you can just get it done quickly, and you're very trusting of that designer, so you're not going to sit there and nitpick things. You just want something that really looks good and functions good. And so it's sort of like I said, it's like Fiverr but like premium.
Alright guys, one short little update for Voix. I want to give a short little overview about my own company, my media company called Voix. So if you are a company or you are an enterprise looking to grow your brand and looking to grow your podcast, feel free to reach out to work with us at Voix. What we do is a fully fledged end-to-end management of your podcast. We take care of the strategy, the consulting, we take care of the growth, the management, we take care of all the editing, all the boring stuff so you can focus on creating good podcasts and create and growing your brand. If you want to grow your podcast and get to new users, if you want to grow your business, generate more revenue and all that good stuff, check out the links down below to Voix. You can follow through to schedule a call with our team, or else you can fill out the application form to see if you qualify to work with us. Thank you. And that's the beauty of when you hire someone great, right? Is that you're trying to get someone who you don't want to manage. You're probably familiar with Cody Sanchez. She's very big on Twitter. She
Yeah.
made a
Hmm.
video recently about Warren Buffett, and it was like Warren Buffett's worth like 150 billion. And the main thing he contributes it down to is that when he hires someone, he doesn't do the barking for them. So if you got a dog, you don't get a dog to do the barking for them. You let them do the barking, right? So when you hire someone like
Yeah.
that, when you hire Designjoy, you're not saying, "Oh, I want this box to be like this. I want to change this." The goal is that you do the work. And I guess I've been fortunate with that with hiring employees that I've hired people who are just fucking rock stars. Like they just get it, right? They're autonomous, they're clear, they're concise in what they do. So I don't have to do the barking for them effectively. I can just tell them what's happening and they know exactly how to run with it. So that's the beauty of why we're trying to do this. But I feel like that's another blurred line of people saying like, "Oh, well, I wouldn't pay 5,000 because I want to be involved in it," or it's like you pay 5,000 because you're not involved with it, and that's how you get your
Yeah,
time
no,
back.
exactly, and I'm not shy. I mean, I'm not shy about telling people when I don't feel like Designjoy is the right fit for them. I mean, I lay out all I talk I always say, like, on these demo calls that I do with clients, I spend more time actually talking about what Designjoy is not than talking about what it actually is, and I touch on those things around, the lack of communication, the lack of structure, all these things are very contrary to how, and they can either choose to move forward with that or they can go another direction. And so
Mhm.
the clients that sign on to that, they subscribe to that way of working, and it ends up working out great. But if you don't do that gatekeeping up front, then you get a lot of clients in who have really false expectations, and it's going to be a terrible quality of service
Mm,
for them. But
mm.
yeah, I don't shy away from how I do things very, very differently, and it makes my life a lot easier.
Talk to me about the time to value metric. So first time I ever heard
Yeah.
about it was from you, and when I first heard about it, I had actually intuitively been trying to like get big wins for our clients anyway. But the second I heard it from
Yeah.
you, I just became so concise with it. We started integrating a lot into our business.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely not my metric. I remember someone, I can't even remember the tweet, but they said something to the effect that like TTV, time to value, will be like the metric of the year, and that was, man, maybe a couple years ago. But so that's when I started to get introduced to it. I was already running Designjoy at that time, but I'm like, that's actually what I do, and that's why it works. I just didn't know that actual metric existed, and I never viewed it that way. But yeah, that's like time to value is really what you could contribute probably 75% of my success to. And what that means in relation to what I do is you have, as a company, and you need design help. I mean, you have several options, all of which consume a lot of your time up front and then post hire. Um, but it's like signing up for Netflix essentially. So you can sign up for Designjoy in literally 30 seconds or less. It takes less time to buy a t-shirt online than it is to sign up for Designjoy, and then you're instantly getting access to the platform, and then literally 48 hours later you have a request done. So
Mm,
contrast that to like hiring a different type of agency where you're maybe 3 or 4 months in before you even start with high fidelity work. That
fuck.
time to value is huge for clients who need to move fast, and a lot of clients need to move fast. A lot of times don't have months to sit around waiting for brand work that ultimately looks the
Mm.
same as if you give me just a couple of days, which was another hot button topic on Twitter. But yeah,
That's very interesting because like I didn't really understand that there was a huge delay. So for me in the podcast space, like we would like, let's say for instance, get working on your branding straight away, your logos, your designs. We would just do it straight away without you even asking, right? So that's like again 24 to 48 hours, we'd have a draft going, and then we would start editing and working on your podcast straight away as well, because like we can just get up and going once you're on board. So it's funny to hear that like some people would even want to delay that period because you would want to do the best for your clients, right, and get this work up front. But I guess there's just so much processes that they have that are outdated that leads to these being delayed.
Yeah. I mean, and for me, it's like, I mean, the time that I spend on projects. I mean, when you're senior level like I am, and I've, you know, at the point of sounding conceited here, I've done arguably more design work than anybody on the planet in the last 6 years. So I have a level of
I
experience
believe
that
it.
most people don't would never be in a position to gain in that short a period of time.
Mhm.
So I apply all of that to what I do, and I don't need 3 days to design a landing page. At a certain point, you get diminished returns on the time that I spend on a project, because what I do in 2 hours versus 4 hours, you're probably not going to be able to tell the difference. And it's probably
Mhm.
going to perform just the same when it comes to conversion, if it's a landing page or display ads or whatever, or an email template.
Yeah.
And if there wasn't, I would spend the extra time doing that. But yeah, a lot of people. Again, it's all comes down to your experience. Obviously, if you don't have the experience, it's going to naturally take you a lot more time. So that's where a lot of people pick me apart, is they don't look at the context of the situation.
How do you deal with that negative feedback?
Oh, it doesn't bother me one bit. No, I mean,
Why?
I've had a spotlight on me since the college days. I mean, I had a huge audience back then. I've dealt with
Really?
feedback my whole life, like that. So it doesn't bother me. I actually kind of enjoy it a little bit.
How do you approach it mentally, like as a result? So that, for instance, if my best friend said to me, "Oh, like I think you should fix this," or you were out of line that way, I would take that feedback positively because it's my friend and I
Oh
value his
yeah, yeah.
opinion.
Hmm.
But when it's like a random person on the internet, I know you're not meant to think about it, but people do, right? So like, what's kind of your advice there to block out that bullshit?
Yeah, I mean, that's the crux, right? Is like, do I know the person? Am I connected to the person? Do I value the person's opinion? I mean, that kind of comes natural to me, where I don't really take anything personally by anybody that I don't have a personal relationship with. For example, I mean, there are times where somebody was connected to me that I got negative feedback from, and it did affect me. One was a client on Twitter that made a big thread that back when I had COVID and sort of dropped the ball for a little bit, made a big thread and went viral. Like that, I did feel very sorry about that. Felt ashamed, felt embarrassed. And that sort of feedback by somebody that's actually knows what they're talking about, has personal experience working with me, means a lot more than some random on Twitter who just thinks that I'm cheapening design work and that sort of thing. It just bounces off of me, and it doesn't affect me at
Mhm.
all.
Well, I guess you're taking so much responsibility being the only individual, right? And that's challenging because for you, when you're sick, if you had COVID, like what can you do, right? You're in that situation. Do you ever feel like that you could buy back your time if you hired people?
Oh yeah, well, I could buy back my time, but I think that this is one of those touching points where I feel like a lot of people, again, don't understand the context of the situation, because most people would equate hiring people with like getting back my time, reducing
Mhm.
stress, possibly making more money, and all these things, right? But like, look at these agencies out there, these design agencies, like Unfold, for example, which was, arguably one of the most successful design agencies in the world, had, I forget how many employees. They went under, right? It does, like, having employees does not equate success or anything like that, or the health of a company. So yeah, I could maybe get back my time, but that would introduce other factors into my life that I really don't care to deal with. And that's, managing people, worrying about profitability. All of a sudden, I have to have a marketing plan, a lead gen funnel, like all these things, because I have people on my payroll that, if it's just me, I don't have to worry about any of those things. I don't even check analytics. I don't check Google Analytics. I don't see where I'm getting referrals from, what the traffic's like. I don't, I check MRR a couple times a month. Like, I don't have to worry about those things because I have no one relying on me other than myself.
Mm. It's a completely different
So
model. Like, so what would be your margin as a result? Because it's just you.
what my margin is today? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
Yeah,
roughly.
gross profit margin is literally 99 or 98.6% or something like that.
That is literally insane,
Gross
man.
profit, and that's not taxes.
Yeah.
That's a different
Yeah,
story.
of
But
course, like net is like
being
completely different.
net is completely different. Not even close to that because I have very little expenses. I have no employees or anything like that that I'm
Yeah.
1099 or W2ing. So yeah, my taxes are out of control. But gross is literally like 176 bucks a month. That's it.
Oh my god. And that's for Trello that you're using and a few other platforms.
Trello, Figma, Webflow, Adobe, and Shutterstock. Shutterstock's my most expensive plan, which is like 99 bucks a month. That's it.
Oh my god, man. That is
Yeah.
crazy. So did you say did you reverse engineer that? Basically being like, I want to build
I
this
didn't. That's how. What?
from
No. That's. I mean, I've cut little things over the years, but like, no. I mean, that's just how I had it since the beginning.
Mhm.
I mean, I launched it in
What
24
about
hours, so I didn't have a lot of time to like figure out a lot of these tools and set up these complex systems and processes and automations, right? And it just worked from
yeah.
day one, so I really haven't changed anything.
So let's say when you went from you left your job, you're at 80K, and then you went up to you've hit as high as 150 in a month from Designjoy itself, is that correct?
For just Designjoy, yeah, 160.
Yeah. So what would you say was different from 80 to 160?
Um, it was actually a lot less work. Funny enough, a lot less
Whoa.
work, a lot better clients. Just better overall and just about every single way. Not what at all what you'd expect when you see those kind of revenue jumps. But
Mm.
it was a total game changer. Increasing my prices to 5K a month, and that's what allowed me to get to 160.
That's the biggest lesson from here is like increase your prices, right? So when should you? Like when does the individual who's
Yeah,
working in design or whatever, like when do you do that?
yeah. I have a very easy formula to that. What I call I mean I didn't come up with this term, but demand based pricing. So as my demand is increased, so have my prices. So if I onboard 5 clients in a week, all right, I'm going to increase my prices. All right, if I onboard 5 more, I'm going to increase my prices. That's how I've gotten to 5K. Every single
Mm.
time I've increased my prices, I've gotten more clients, and I just incrementally do that until, well, I can't say I do it until it plateaus because Designjoy is far from plateauing, but I get to the point where I'm comfortable. I feel like I'm providing the value that I'm selling the service for and not having to stress about overworking or overachieving to provide more value at that higher price point. Like 5K for me is like I sleep comfortably at night and feel good about the work that I do and the volume of it.
Uh, that's insane. What about existing clients? Do they get like bumped up to the new price?
No, no, they
Yeah.
stay at the low price. I still have clients paying 2,500 bucks a month. I think that's the lowest
Fair.
that people are paying now. But there for a while, I
Yeah.
mean, I had people that was paying 1,500 bucks a month way back 4 or 5 years ago. But yeah,
Yeah, I'm the
it's
exact
price
same.
stays the same.
Yeah, I have some
It's
clients
and
that are like
yeah,
started at like
yeah,
1,500.
yeah, and it's fine. I mean, if they became a problem for me and took up a lot of my time, obviously I would change that. But they haven't, so it hasn't been a problem.
I want to ask you about some of your influences. So I heard you mention Justin Welsh previously. You connected
Yeah,
with
yeah, I
him
love Justin.
and a few other people. Who were some of your biggest influences in how you design your business and design your lifestyle?
Um, I mean, Justin on the solopreneur front, Justin Welsh, has been like the biggest breath of fresh air to me, and I've had the opportunity to speak with him. Just a freaking wealth of knowledge. That guy's a genius.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, he's probably been, since I've joined Twitter, been the biggest. Um, Other than that, there's really not individuals, but it's more communities. So like the indie hacker community on indiehackers.com has been like a source of inspiration for me, being involved in that community and seeing others build services similar to Designjoy and not similar, but all kind of in the same boat. Paul Jarvis, who wrote Company of One, has been a big influence to me. If you haven't, I don't know if you've probably never read that book, but fantastic book. Totally is basically what I do, but said way better than I can say it. But yeah, that's really about it.
Yeah. I think it's funny because like what you've done from the beginning was very unique. So it's not like you had like a blueprint of someone else that you could follow. You're just sharing your
Definitely
updates, right, on
not.
Indie Hackers. And as a result, it's
Hmm.
very much like a nuance. Now, I guess as time goes on, you could look at people like Justin who is systematized on how he wants his lifestyle. He's like, I'm
Oh
not letting
gosh,
other
yeah,
people come in, stealing his time. Like his famous saying is, I want to do what I want, when I want, with whoever I want. I think that's like a perfect way to put it, right? He's not. scaling to a certain degree because he wants his time back, which is funny. But that's kind of interesting from
Yeah.
your perspective because as you bring on more people, you are still working a lot though, right? I know you've gotten it down to a very small amount of hours per week, but it had that intensity over time.
Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, I was working just as much as I human possibly could.
Mhm,
14, 15-hour days there for a good amount of stretch. And that was, I kind of feel like I had to go through that to understand where I ultimately wanted to land and really what was important to me. And
mhm,
it took me 4 years to realize that money wasn't everything it was cracked up to be. And once you make
yeah,
enough for so long, it means less and less to you and isn't as much of a driving force as it once was. And then you realize that time is ultimately important. So like trying to strike that balance between like making a lot of money but also having time to enjoy
mhm.
yourself. And I have 3 girls and a wife, so for me it's enjoying my
Crazy.
family and having some like some space to like be free from work and to think about other things. So yeah, it took me a good 4.5, 5 years to get there, going through hell and back to get to this point.
That's what
But
you should learn people like you, right? Is that you're the person who's been there, who's done it, who's made the money, and now you're offering that advice saying that, okay, it is important, you need it. Of course, you want to put like your 3 girls through school and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be expensive. But at the same time, there's that other aspect of life that you need to have, like your health, your freedom, your happiness, that people will
yeah,
often forget in pursuit of the goal, right?
yeah, like, look, I mean, you see these tweets all the time on Twitter, and people talking about it. It's like, oh, true freedom isn't having a lot of money. It's being able to do what you want when you want. Well, I mean, how do you get to that point, right? You make a lot of money. Otherwise, you're going to be some bum who's, if you don't have money,
Yeah.
you really can't achieve those other things that you ultimately want at the end of the day. So my end goal with Design Joy is no longer, it once was, but is no longer to just make a lot of money. It's to provide me
Mhm.
enough money to do the things that I want to do that are ultimately like more fulfilling than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't get me wrong, making a lot of money is fun. I mean, I still make good money, but
Mhm.
that's not the end goal anymore.
When did you just decide to make this shift into creating courses?
Yeah, it was a slow transition. I mean, I'd obviously been asked to do courses and thought about doing courses for a 3 year stretch on the latter end of running Design Joy. And then I started getting into one-on-one calls, and those slots would fill up so quick, and I realized how much people would pay and how much people value talking through these things. And so I did enough of those, and those were 1 to 2 hours a piece, and back to back to back, and they were fun and fulfilling, but totally exhausting. And
So
so
tiring.
the course was like, yeah. Do you do them at all?
I did them initially
Do any
before we started
consulting?
the agency, and I was
Yeah,
exhausted by the process. And what you find is that
yeah,
you have to do so much prep work, right? To really effectively get it done. Like you want to track their work and everything, but
yeah.
it's not 1 hour. It's a lot more than an
No,
hour.
you like dump so much energy because you want to, like, people are paying good money for these, so you want to be like on the ball and just, even though calls were an hour, I'd be sticking around for 2.5 hours. My wife would be like, "What the hell are you doing?" And they
Mhm.
were just they're exhausting, and so the course was naturally a way to take that at scale, I guess, and
Yeah.
spread it to thousands of people all at once versus doing it individually.
When do you make that transition to start creating courses? Like you need the audience to get to that point.
Yeah.
Would you say
Yeah. I
that's
mean, the
like a
audience
big
definitely
telltale sign?
helped.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just I mean, it really it spawned from me having a meeting with my brother-in-law who we just talked about kind of like taking your passion and sort of turning it into a purpose. I mean, I'd gotten to the point where I had made enough money for Design Joy and had been successful for long enough to where I'm like, I feel like my duty now is to make this model known to the world and to share like a behind the scenes all inclusive organized way of how I run these things, because I do feel I truly do feel like it can be replicated to some degree by many designers out there. Not maybe not to the scale that I've built it to and exactly like it, but like I knew that there was something here for not just me but for other people. And
Hmm.
I mean, let's be honest, it's a way to make more money too. I mean, everything that I do at Design Joy is tied to time. And so the course was the first thing that I built in quite a while that did not have any sort of tie to my time and my work. So,
Infinite scale.
it,
You made a good point about fulfillment though, because I think that's an interesting observation when people like you, or in general, they've built something that's substantial, and then it's time then to you almost feel like you want to give back or help other people. So I just had a client yesterday, a new client, and I was like, why do you want to start a podcast? And he said, well, we've built this agency to 1 million a year, 1.2 million a year, and now it's time to, I don't feel fulfilled from it, and I want to help other people. And I thought that was very interesting. So he was like, through a podcast, through like a learning platform, I get that touch. And I was like, dude, that's what I started with the podcast, and then I built a business around
Yeah,
it because I just enjoy doing it, right? It makes fuck all money because that's why I have the business, right? But so it's
exactly.
like at some point everyone does that, and it's interesting to observe because maybe that's why people who work in really good jobs who are like super unfulfilled can't do that, because like what can you do, right? If you're a VP in Google, like what the fuck can you do? Teach people how to be VPs? You can't, right? So it's like
Right.
you have that leverage to be able to help people now and have that element of fulfillment, which I think is fuels design joy and your courses really effectively.
Yeah, there's literally nothing better than like teaching people and making money from it. Like giving to people and giving them a way to like earn an income and leave their 9 to 5, and you also making money from that. Like there really is no better combination. Like, yeah, I could work in the dark and design joy and build up my 401k and all that sort of stuff and do that. That's fine and that's fun. But like giving people the power to do that themselves and making money from it, I mean, that's you get a lot of hate from selling a course, but there's really nothing more satisfying than that.
Yeah. And again, right, you actually get better at designing by helping people and teaching people. So the best way to get better is to teach, right? Distill your thoughts. And someone asks you, why would I design like this? And then you would start thinking, oh, I design like
Hmm.
this because of that. And now I bring this into my own work. So it's almost like a way for you to get better is you're actively learning by teaching other people and getting paid and
Yeah,
helping them. So it's a win-win-win.
no, there was several things like when I did the course. I mean, I was fortunate to build a community of people to actually be able to voice things to me and to each other. And so I learned quite a bit, not only going through the process of spelling out everything that I do, but also the feedback that I got from clients being like, "Hey, why do you do it this way, not this way?" And I've adjusted things that have greatly impacted my bottom line, my efficiencies, all of that just
Mhm.
based on what I've gathered from people, giving feedback on the course. So, yeah, it's really kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, and again, everyone learns together, right? So if you have a course, it has people thinking about productized services, they're putting themselves together, they're working with other people, and they're also teaming up for it, right? And before we finish up, when I ask you on that, on the productized service, in terms of how it can apply to any business, like how would you pitch this to different types of businesses to try productize their service?
Yeah, I mean, I always say like every type of service-based business can be productized to a certain extent, right?
Mm,
there are certain services that are more susceptible to it, and it's more appropriate for like design. There are other type of services that will not look exactly like Designjoy. Let's say copywriting, for example. Like you need to have a deeper understanding of what they're trying to convey. That may incorporate you having a more real-time communication with them. Whereas design, I
mhm,
can take a design brief and kind of design something kind of in isolation and siloed out and provide it back to you, and it's good to go. But the way the advice that I give people is like take what you already do today, whether it's copywriting, whether it's development, whether it's marketing or even podcast. I mean, there's a lot of podcasters and podcast editors doing this sort of thing. Take just the thing that you're really, really good at, not the things that you're like semi good at and you can do and you know enough to be dangerous. Like take the things that you're just very, very good at, even if it's one thing, and focus on that thing. You got to be good and fast. That's my two rules that I repeat all the time. Create a
mhm,
package around it. For some parameters for me, it's like one request at a time and that sort of thing, and unlimited brands. Like create a package for it, put a price to it, crank out a landing page. Don't spend a lot of time, don't spend a lot of money on it, and put it out there. If you've got an
mm,
audience, great. Otherwise, you may have to go the traditional route of getting clients. And that's what all my other competitors have to do. But it's truly like the type of model where like once you become aware of it, it is a game changer for you. Like you're kind of mind blown. Like clients all the time share that with me. Like they had no clue a model like this existed. It was just a matter of getting it in front of their faces. That
mhm.
that sold them on it. So if you can do that, which is pretty easy to do nowadays, then you could be successful at it.
Interesting you said about what you're fast and good at, because I guess to your point, for design for you, there could be different things you could do, right? Landing pages, web development, many different variables. For me, there's obviously the full production cycle, but we just focus in on growth. Like we obviously do the production too, but it's like that one key point. So, how do you work through like that kind of packaging process? So you have like the name, the title, the web page, all going back to that one key area that you're good at. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, I mean that took maturing in what I do, and being confident in the things that I'm good at, and kind of letting go of the things that I'm like okay or just terrible at. I mean, when I
Yeah.
launched Designjoy, I'd kind of do anything for everybody and those sorts of things. Like once you open yourself up to that, like you have to move through requests quickly because people are paying a lot of money and they expect results very quickly. I mean, that's what I spell out. I spell out a 48-hour turnaround time. So if I take on work that I'm not good at and not efficient at, that not only prolongs that project, but then it has a trickle down effect to all of my other clients that affects them too. So you have to be very selective, very protective of that. And I've gotten over the years just very upfront and stern, and kind of like this calculated confidence around what Designjoy is good at. And if it doesn't fall under under that umbrella, that's
Mhm.
fine. I'll help you find an alternative route to go and get that source, whether it's, another agency or whatever. But just being very confident in what you offer and being okay that you're not going to be a one-stop shop for everybody in every use case.
Saying no is so important there, right? But it builds confidence. So of course, 6 years into this, and
Yeah.
an extra,
Yeah.
you need that confidence to
S-
do it.
Yeah, saying no gets easier with time and easier with revenue, right? When I when I first started, I rarely ever said no. Now I say
Yeah.
no all the time. So it's easier for me to say up here at the top, and but in reality, earlier on you need to say yes to more things you say no to, but as you grow, then that kind of flips on its head.
And ultimately, if you think about it this way, when you say yes to everything, you'll figure out what you don't want to focus on. So if you say yes to five different
Mhm.
types of projects, then you can say, all right, we're saying no to these going forward. So you have to say yes before you can say no, but you're saying yes to figure out what you want to say no to, right? That's kind of how I think about this
Yeah,
because
yeah. No, there's things that I've done for 6 years that to this day I'm realizing that are not they just don't fit into the mix. So
yeah.
that's really at this point I'm not really adjusting my prices. So that's really the only way that I continue to optimize Designjoy is by continuing to be more selective with what I do, which ultimately has
Mhm.
impacts everything, and impacts the client experience and impacts my day. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's easier said than done when you're not in my position, but it's a very nice thing to be in my position where you can say no to those things that you just don't either enjoy or you're not good at.
It's what you get after 6 years, right? 6 years into it, you get to that
Six
selective
years
point.
and oh god, an ungodly number of hours. Yeah, I guess that's the payoff, which arguably may be worth it, maybe not, but it
You
is
did the
quite
reps,
nice.
man. That's all that matters. Brett, I want to say a
Yeah,
massive thank you. This was a great session, man. I admired your work. I think you were doing an amazing job. And yeah, I want to say massive thank you for everything. It's going to be very valuable for a lot of people.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.